August Vollmer once stated that a police officer's job is the highest calling in the world. Only the finest men should have the job. They should be the best educated. They should have a college degree. That's what they should be. And what are they? They're dumbbells. Wow. So as an administrator for a law enforcement agency, I see critical skills and areas that need improvement. I've rose through the ranks. For 24 years I've policed. I've gone from patrolman, I've gone to sergeant, lieutenant. I've done investigations, the patrol side. I'm captain. I've been the deputy chief of police, and I hire folks and I fire folks. But it's important. When you're hiring folks, again, Rob Bergentrell says that only 1% of the agencies require them. We don't currently require them, but I think it would be a good thing to add to our hiring process. What about college degrees helps out? Well, one, I think we're going to talk about a little bit about how experts have recommended it for the past 100 years, and we're going to talk about how college degrees help out in these critical areas, and we'll talk about how college degrees help out in high liability areas. So I briefly mentioned August Vollmer. I think he's the founding father of kind of modern American policing. So we've already seen where he wants you to have a college degree, but just a little bit to tell you about him. Here's a picture in 1932 where he's in a trial. This is John Larson. He created the polygraph, the second polygraph machine there at University of California, Berkeley, and you'll see they're using a trial in Chicago in 1932. He's the first recorded agency that they, with him at the helm, where they started using scientific analysis of blood, soil, and fibers to help prosecute cases. So again, you just see that he's very forward-thinking. He required 312 hours of training for his officers, and he fast forwarded, 100 years later, here in Georgia, we're only required to have a little over 400 hours to be a basic peace officer. So very forward-thinking. He's recommending college degrees. Moving on about 50 years, Rob Bergentrell in 2010 stated that, they wanted this National Advisory Commission on Criminal Justice Standards and Goals. They wanted officers to have a 4-year degree also when they got hired in agencies. So they had this plan. They wanted a 10-year plan. They stepped it up. You had to have, for example, maybe a GED, or move from, just having to have a GED, maybe then to a high school diploma, having some college, having a 2-year degree and a 4-year degree, but they had a 10-year plan and they had it mapped out. So by the early 80s, agencies would start implementing it. Because again, we know that only 1% of agencies are required to have that for hiring. 3 years ago, 2015, President Obama created this task force on 21st century policing, and they made some training recommendations. Community policing and problem-solving principles, interpersonal communication skills, language and cultural responsiveness. They wanted these type of training. Now, they didn't specifically say college degrees, but they did recommend these things. Well, where do we get these things? We're going to move on to the second point. It helps out in critical areas of law enforcement. These critical areas would be on what they just talked about in that 21st century policing report. But first and foremost, what I want to say is a critical skill is writing. We learn how to write in college, for example, or we've learned how to do that in regular school, but we enhance it and learn to do it better in college. It kind of paints the picture for the prosecution to, you to have better results at trial. So many times that I've watched case law, and when folks tend to lose cases, you read in the stuff and you see that it was poor communication. They didn't get their ideas expressed very well. So again, communication skills, I learned these in taking classes like public speaking. We learned ethical speaking, we learned to listen to others, we learned to, listen to their ideas before we jump the gun, if you will. Again, that's a critical skill for law enforcement. We need to, as we respond to calls, listen to folks, help them out, see what they need. And then finally, problem-solving skills. Well, we learned that in college too. How how do I deal with other students, maybe if I'm on campus, or if I'm off campus and I'm doing these reports, I have to deal with these interpersonal communication skills of we do discussions all the time on our online classes. We present ideas, they present ideas, and sometimes they're opposing, and we have to defend our stuff, or defend our point of view. So we learn these skills in college. So moving on from where do we learn them, how do those skills that we've just learned help us in high liability areas? So we know that use of force is a huge issue, and we see it in the news all the time. We've kind of talked about that in the beginning, how we're in the media spotlight so much. But there's two studies in particular. Edwards in 2017, he brought out that educated students, or students with four-year degree, officers with four-year degrees, were used significantly lower levels of force. That's great. Now, going back to another study, Alvarado in 2015 said that officers with the college degrees were less likely to use force, and when they did use force, they used lower levels of force. So again, we see that that's super important to us to help keep us, I hate to say it, keeping us out of the news with this bad light of we've used too much force or whatever. Why do I think that these studies are true? Well, I think they're true because, again, we've got these skills in college, these interpersonal communication skills. We understand how to talk to people. We understand how important it is to talk to them ethically or properly with this cultural diversity, and things such as that. So, in conclusion, as a law enforcement administrator, I hope that you understand my point of view of why it is important to have a college degree, that it helps out, because the experts have been recommending it for the past 100 years. It helps out in these critical areas like we talked about: writing, interpersonal communications, problem solving. Because we've gathered those type of skills, particularly that interpersonal communications and problem solving skills, I think that it shows that we use less force, which is, again, a super high liability area of law enforcement. And in saying all that, I hope you'll agree with me that college makes a better police officer. So for the 70% of you that do not have college degrees, because Ryberg and Terrell in 2010 said that only 20 to 30% of the officers had college degrees or four-year degrees. The other 70% of you, do you want to stay a dumbbell or get that college degree?